Anyways, before we get started, I kind of want to paraphrase a little something by the one Mr. Henry Rollins. So he said it's like back in the 1980s. I'm sure he doesn't agree with it now. But the thing is, there are lots of people out there who think that there's something special. They get in bands, they get up on stages to read poetry, and 10 times out of 10 they're full of shit. I am one of those people. Let's go. Anyways, so this first one is called Discovery. There's something that seems precious about a high school romance. Maybe it makes the time you have together all the more precious, knowing it's limited per evening. Because there's no way that your parents will let them stay over, and there's no way that their parents would be okay with it either. You have to hide under blankets and in shadowy rooms to have any sort of intimacy. It doesn't even have to be sex. You just want to hold their waist or memorize the shape of their face. But all this secrecy is what makes those connections all the more valuable. Two outlaw hearts stitched together, yet to be totally hardened by the weathering that life tends to subject them to. Just passion, love, lips touching, arms around waist and shoulders, and utopian visions of the future with each other. Their ride shows up, and you stealthily kiss their cheek as they leave. You guys will next meet up after school and go to the park, then go out to eat and maybe sit on their couch in their living room or basement and watch a movie that they remember from their childhood before your parents inevitably come to pick you up during the most pivotal scene, and you have to promise that you have to continue it next time. But until then, you'll spend hours into the night onto the phone with them. You'll meet up in the hallways and you'll sit together at lunch, support your friends at football games, play productions, band concerts, and art exhibits. You'll hold hands and cuddle into You'll hold hands and cuddle into each other as you watch the event with the curiosity of what it's like to feel their touch, feel their warmth, feel another heartbeat slowly fade as a faint smile forms on each of your faces. Your heart yearns for theirs from the distance that comes with the nights in, family trips, or school events that preoccupy. But your distance is merely a challenge when it's forced, with teases of a life together coming to light with the times that you do spend together. There's never enough time, it seems, when you're together, or too much time when you're separate. But a solace is made in sharing a hometown. A solace is made in knowing that they're merely 10 minutes away. A connection is made in knowing that you have seen the same streets, and the fact that you've got to get up for school. You both wander through the same morning dew that dampens your shoes as you stagger through the door into a moving vehicle, excuse me. You both hate the fact that you've got to sit through a lesson that you could give a shit about. But seeing them in the morning is more energizing than any cup of coffee could ever be. Because with them, you are alive. The family's backyards feel like pastures, the school dances like wedding receptions, and the field trips like honeymoons. It doesn't matter how small they make you feel, an inch is a mile when you're looking in their eyes. The next one is called Reunion. It's about calling up someone that you used to know really well, but now it's almost like you guys are strangers again. We spoke on the phone for the first time in a little bit. We once breathed the same air, but now it's like we're worlds apart. We're not school kids talking about our friends and teachers anymore. We're playing catch up on our respective adult rat races. We're like strangers compared to how we used to be. Every time I talk to you, we reintroduce ourselves by confiding in each other our biggest self-revelations like we'll never see each other again. I find myself picking and choosing what to tell you now. A far cry from a couple of calendars ago where I would mark things like your birthday. I'd even tell you in detail what little doodles I drew. A couple of years ago around this time, you cut most of your hair off. And I remember being dismayed because I loved how long it was. Every time I turn around now, it's a new style. Mine just gets longer and more dead. Our phone calls get shorter and smaller, but when they happen, they're a calendared event. I wish I could play the amount of music that I can't listen to without you. Otherwise, I'd be reduced to a broken mess on the floor. Records that bring me back to when we were crossing our school to say hi to each other before class. You will always mean something to me, and I know you feel the same way. Do you ever feel things the way that I do? Maybe you can tell me next time I call. This next one's about alcohol. An old friend of mine posted some real depressing shit on their Snapchat story. Their friend turned 21 and they both got drunk apparently. It was a screenshot of a selfie, and the selfie read, "Happy 21," and on that drunk shit. The screenshot read, "Her 21st was yesterday. We got drunk as fuck. Happy late V-Day. Why in the fuck would you celebrate getting drunk? Maybe it's like when you're a middle-class kid and you get your first phone. It's so damn mundane, but when you finally have one of your own, it's the coolest shit ever. Reminds me of when I first got drunk. I was 13 and I felt 13 feet tall. I snuck downstairs in the basement and drank 3 light beers in 30 minutes, which may not seem like much, but my tolerance was nil. So it hit me like a freight train. My clarity, gone. My inhibitions, gone. My sadness, gone. This is where it all starts. I can't tell you how many nights I've spent drunk as hell and telling myself it's the last time. It started out fun. The emotional numbness was just a cool perk, but then it became the focus, the reason. I grew up in a family of drinkers. Most of them were retired military with PTSD I couldn't even know the extent of. It's not like they talk about it. Their wives drank too, probably to numb the emotional scars from the adultery they were subjected to, which they eventually committed to. But when I was young, it seemed like the way to have fun. They drank on weekends, weeknights, camping trips, parties, in the workshop, in the mornings. When I grew up, though, I realized it was a problem. By the time I realized this, I was already too deep in. Some of my friends drove drunk. Some of them died. When I couldn't make peace with it all, I tried to forget about it. I was straight edge for 3 years. 2 of those years were spent in a relationship, and it's been 1 year since it ended. 3 cheers, everybody. This next one also has some sensitive content in it, so, if you have to get up and leave or just don't want to hear it, I totally get that. It's cool. It's a little intense. When I was 12, I told this girl I've known since kindergarten I wanted to kill myself. I never felt catharsis like that, finally able to put words to this feeling I'd had forever. Landed me in the guidance counselor's office. I told her, I hope I don't have to tell my parents about this. She said, well, you have to. This is serious. My mom came to pick me up early from school that day, probably white-knuckling the steering wheel and choking on the lump in her throat as I sat down in the car next to her. I wish I had composure like that. I woke up sometimes to see her standing in my bedroom doorway. I've lost count of how many times I put a gun in my mouth, clutching the trigger, my mind racing with everything I ever did to hurt another person. Every time I made someone I loved cry, cringe, sigh, irritated, angry. Every time I lost control or never had it. Every awkward silence, every hard conversation, every night on the floor of the laundry room of my parents' house, sobbing, wishing that I wasn't myself and I could just be what everyone wanted instead. I don't know what it's like to be dead, but I always thought I wanted it. Never understood what the big deal was in saying it until this girl I know told me the same thing. All I could imagine her was hanging from the joists in her apartment, her mom walking in to give her birthday gifts. All I could imagine were her stuffed animals covered in pieces of the brain that told her she had to do it because she was a waste of life. I started to cry, I started to choke. I went to her house and saw her there at the kitchen counter making food. Her room was cozy and lived in. She walked past me and I felt the warmth of her arm as it brushed my skin. I finally understood it. It doesn't matter what you do or what you've done. You mean everything to me because you are alive. Worst case scenario, I live on a planet full of people I disagree with, and I'd rather have that than nothing at all. Because even in discomfort, there's comfort at all. And if you're yelling at me, I know you feel something, and that's more invigorating than nothing at all. For you guys, I think I might end with this. I think I might read like a couple more or something just from a folder that on my phone that I don't have for this show. So here's one that I wrote on a plane on the way to North Carolina on a surf trip. Got to think about everybody that I went to high school with or everybody I went to college with and just kind of thinking where they are now. It's called Rat Race. They used to be so airtight. Their cliques were unbreakable. Their bonds were welded together. Everyone fit in their own compartment. He was a jock that got off on the dopamine rush of weightlifting and Friday night lights. She was an artist with a pencil pouch and never-ending notebooks of sketches, etchings, and pieces. He was a loner. He had trouble talking to people, and they all thought he was off kilter and kept him at a distance. But he was just struggling. She was an athlete, a tall, blonde, tan-to-tone prodigy that eventually got offered a scholarship. He was a delinquent with a foul mouth and a troubled background who liked to cut class so he can go and get bent and graffiti walls with his friends. I never thought those days would end where everything fit together so perfectly, whether they wanted it or not. Even when they got given their caps and gowns, they were given to them while they were at school. Summer was coming, but it all felt like it was just the end of the year, not the beginning of their legitimized lives. They walked the stage and celebrated afterwards. Some were grateful for what they had. Some were grateful that relief was on its way. Where are they now after all these years? Whether it is age 18 or 23, they found themselves back at square one, their identities wiped clean, but a distant memory. What do they have now? I'll tell you what. They've got credit debt, the same car, the same house, apartment, and desire for stability. They even share the same taste in alcohol. Some of them work together, some of them are still friends. Some of them took the first ride out of town and made their own similar life. The alarm clock screams at them all the same way, just in different tones and at different times. They all go see their parents occasionally, unless they're dead or estranged. And they all pretend that they're doing just fine. They all know they're not because it all feels so empty, but a few of them look back at their olden days and wish to relive them. They open up old photo albums, old recordings, sometimes with their friends there with them. They decorate their conversations with interjections of, "Remember when?" They laugh somberly, knowing that they'll never get that again. Their faces have wrinkles and worry lines, and they all pretend to love their spouses like the first day they met. The sex isn't the same as it was before. They keep having to reinvent the wheel just so the engine can turn over, if you know what I mean. They sometimes think about their parents and wonder how they lasted this long, if they even did. Some of them split, some of them died, some of them don't even know their children. Oh, well, you know what? Tell you what. Let's go get a drink, roll a joint, shoot up, or white out. Let's go put on a new TV series and invest ourselves in something that isn't our lives for a second. Then we can waste our lives buried in another's. And keep thinking about how life will never feel as rich as it once was. It's all part of growing up, they say. Well, they're all retired at 27. The reunion is next year. Some will go, some will stay away, some are dead and some are in prison. Guess the paperwork didn't end with graduation like we all hoped it would.
Woo!
I got one more and then I'll stop killing you all slowly. So I wrote this one also at an airport. I was actually sitting at Charlotte International Airport getting ready to fly back from Nashville on one of my surf trips. And I had time to just think this was completely off the top of my head. Probably the least focused thing that I've written in a good while. And it's called Layover. And this one is not intense, it's more so just kind of something to think about. Perpetually between the beginning and end of everything. It's all one way, but many stops. Different food, different taste, different people, different place. United in a rush towards the grave. It doesn't matter how fast or slow you take it. We're all getting there at a set time. Make the most of what you got. The baggage that you carry with you, flight after flight, night after night. Pack the essentials, but be sure to take some souvenirs. After all, if you've got all that baggage, you better make good use of it. So, what will you have to show for your journey at the end of the line? Will you be bare and invisible? Will you weigh down every flight that you board? Will you be sentimental for what you left behind? Or will you be weathered and well-traveled? Thank you all so much. It was great. That is, I believe, Ian West Horton. Everybody give a big hand to Rick.